enterprise limitations, what we're trying to look at is how the likely impact of the external factors, like the political aspects, the economical, the environmental, socio, and the lifestyles and the legal respects, and also the environmental aspects, all of these, how they're going to have the influence on the performance of a solution, right? That's what we're trying to assess here within this context of the enterprise limitations. But also, apart from all these external factors, we need to consider the performance of the solution with respect to some of these business rules, the business constraints within which that need to operate. So all of that would be forming the important focus and the focal point for us in this activity. So when we talk about the factors, it could be like the work culture, it could be the operational aspect of the business, some of the technical components, the stakeholder interests and their significant power or authority over the decisions around the product or the project. It could be about the reporting structures, the hierarchy, it could be all of these, it could be all the other things apart from these, the external factors that we discussed, the PESL, that would be giving us an indicative aspect of how the solution would be performing in terms of the limitations that we need to adhere to. And this would help us to come up with ways and means to understand and tackle some of these potential problems, and if there are any gaps, we can try and address these here, and that would give us a way to help realize the true value of what is the proposed solution. So the potential value of the solution and the solution scope, we can try and meet, given all these constraints that we have, right? So looking at the input-output diagram for this one, the implemented or the constructed solution so far, so that's going to be the input, because that is what is to be considered. The current state description as is situation, and even perhaps the potential or the future state description, very important. The solution performance analysis that we did in the previous activities, that's really going to be an input for this one as well. And then once we have these inputs, we need to start looking at the business objectives, because they're the guiding factors, they're the driving factors for us to consider this solution. So are we able to meet the business objectives? Are we able to meet the proposed to be situation, the solution description as well? And obviously the change strategy, giving us the entire set of the approaches, the methods, the techniques, the tools, and the risk analysis results. Sorry, go ahead.
We've moved from as is to be now here. Am I right in understanding that?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Because this is the to be situation, right? The future state. Because now, as I mentioned, we are now talking about the solution and the solution space rather than the requirements now, because this is tending to be the solution. We've already got the solution in some form, and that's why here we are talking about implemented or the constructed solution. Already we've built some features, so we're now trying to understand if we still need to make any modifications to that in the light of all the factors that we're discussing, the external factors, the political, economical, environmental, sociological, lifestyle, legal, environmental, and as well as the internal factors like your own stakeholder interests, their objectives, the business constraints, the policies, procedures of the own organization. In the light of all these constraints and all these kind of limitations and the resource crunch that we have, how can we structure the solution better? How can we still achieve the future state description, the to be state description that we have set out for, considering all the impacts that these external factors and internal factors are going to have on the proposed solution, and how can we minimize that impact? So that's what is the core objective of this activity.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, and the solution scope again is very important, because that sets out the boundaries and everything else that we're going to operate within the solution scope. And then the tasks that you would potentially use this enterprise limitation output as an input is basically the analyze current state and the recommend actions to increase solution value. Again, these are the some of the related tasks that are connected to this particular output, which is the enterprise limitation or the organizational limitation, whatever you call it as. So now we would like to look at the important value and the contribution that we do as BA here in this activity. So the enterprise culture assessment is basically one of the important things, because we need to assess the overall culture. Are we, as we discussed before, is it a risk aversive culture or is it risk taking culture? What kind of a culture are we in terms of also is it more a democratic culture? Is it autocratic? Is it more of involving decision making from amongst the people, or is it just decision taken by one person and then that gets implemented? So what kind of a culture, what kind of a decision making, what kind of authority, what kind of structure we have got within our own organization? And then the stakeholder impact analysis is going to be is a significant input to this, because we need to understand what kind of output or outlook that the stakeholder has on our own product. And again, when you talk about stakeholder, it could be external, it could be internal. So with the internal stakeholders, again, we discussed owners, managers, team members, employees, staff, all of these, the internal ones. And then the external ones would be the regulators, the competitors, the customers, end users, all of these. So what is going to be the likely impact of these different stakeholders in terms of their outlook, their functions, what they do, where they live, where they work, and what their concerns are, what their pain points are on our solution? So that's going to be the impact analysis. And once we carry out that kind of impact analysis, we're in a better position to understand how our solution so far that we have done, that we've developed, is going to be impacted by the viewpoints or by the influences or the authorities or the interest levels of the different stakeholders. How are they perceiving our solution as? Do they think that this is going to help them? Do they think that this is going to really help enrich their lives? How is it going to support their work? If it is not, if it's a negative outlook, they think that it's a burden on them, if they think that it's something much more than the traditional things that they're going to do, it's one more on the top of the existing set of tools that they're using, then it's going to be a significant concern. We need to really address that and actually assuage them to say that, it's okay, it's not going to really hurt you. Using this tool or a product or adapting this new process would only help you, by reducing your workload. It would reduce your cost of searching for other options. It would reduce your time that you consume in creating 10 reports. It could help you by finding the person that could help you in quick and easy manner. So all of these different ways that you need to convince them that it's going to really help the stakeholders do their job better or get to their objectives quicker. So that's the whole purpose of why we have set out this initiative for. So again, the stakeholders could be external as well as they could be internal stakeholders. And each of them has got their own perspective. We need to understand that. And again, it's not like the stakeholder understanding the elicitation and doing the workshops and those interviews and all those that we did in the early part, which is primarily about the exploration, about the discovery, right? About trying to understand their needs, their objectives, and all that. So that's done. That's all done and dusted. That's a good, perhaps even you can do that, continue doing that even now. But that's from the point of view of the problem space. That's to understand their needs, their expectations, their objectives, their challenges, and what they're going to expect from this and all that. But what we're doing now within this context of enterprise limitations activity is to understand all of those from the point of view of the existing solution. So what is their viewpoint about this solution? So now this is not about exploration, is not about discovery. Now we've got a solution in hand and we're going to present this. We're going to let them have a go with the solution. We're going to understand what is their viewpoint about this solution. How do they react to the usage of this solution? What is their overall opinion, views, and preferences about the solution? So this is the solution context. This is all completely a different context from where we have initially done the elicitations exercise and the techniques, right? So that's a very important point to note here. And then the organizational structure changes. So that's very important because sometimes organizations do go through a lot of different changes in terms of their work culture. Sometimes they do make random, or sometimes they do make really rapid shifts in their structure, operating and reporting structures, in the way some of the roles have been defined. Some of them, become from top down. They would actually kind of have a mesh structure where you've got a linear reporting structures, as well as some kind of team and multidisciplinary structures coming in tandem, and they both go hand in glove. So again, that's very important to understand those kind of changes happening within the organization structure. What are the dynamics involved, right? So is the organization going through some kind of significant M&A, mergers and acquisitions, or is it going through some kind of internal churn, as what we say, responding to the lot of attrition happening within the industry, within the organization? Perhaps they would have come up with some new ways of implementing new roles, or role rotation, job rotation, or flattening flattening the hierarchy, right? Moving a lot of flab in the top, trying to remove all the senior management, which is really just adding to the flab and not really being contributing to the productivity. You might want to actually consider all these different things to understand what's really happening within the organization, and then also have a look at the operational aspects of how that would affect your solution. So that's important here. That's what we do, is we call it as operational assessment. What are the various operational aspects of the infrastructure, the technologies, the role definitions, the people, the processes, and how they're going to impact the behavior or the acceptance of the solution. Very important here. And who are the stakeholders that we tend to work with in this activity? Again, the customers, very, very important, because we are now going to let them have a go with our solution. They're going to have their hands on the solution. They're going to use it, evaluate it, and then come back with the feedback and give us the qualitative, quantitative insights into how the product and the solution is really turning out to be. And the domain SME is very important again here, because they would domain SME, sometimes even the implementation SMEs and the solution architects would help us shape our views and come up with better alternatives to align with the customers and the end users perspectives of our solution. And again, they're all great sources of qualitative and quantitative inputs and insights into the solutions aspects. And sponsors and regulators here give us a good idea into how we need to structure our solution in the context of all the requirements, the compliance, regulatory laws and policies and procedures that we need to abide by when coming up with the package of the solution. So that actually is the set of stakeholders that we need to really keep in mind when working with this activity. And then the techniques that you would potentially use during this activity are the brainstorming. So we need to understand what are the kind of areas that the organization is good at. What should we do? What kind of ideas that can be encouraged to change the ways of working? For example, the structures. Should we shift from the normal traditional kind of waterfall models to agile, or should we adapt some new ways of working, some kind of defect reducing mechanisms like Six Sigma, for example? Should we try and implement and adapt Six Sigma into our approach? So all of these kind of decisions you would like to welcome in the views from amongst the team members and the stakeholders. Benchmarking, again, is significant input for us to understand what's happening around the market. Data mining, again, rich insights in terms of all the data that we have got and what we can do with the data. Document analysis is, again, looking at the policies, the procedures, the laws, the regulations, all of those huge documents that we have got from the regulators, from within the organization's policies. We need to go through all of them to understand the limitations, the constraints, that are limiting the performance of our solution. Again, decision analysis is a critical one that we can use to have a go, no go decision. Risk analysis management, again, plays a critical role to understand all the risks that we can encounter and how we're going to come up with the mitigation strategies. Lessons learned, again, from the assessment that we do in terms of internal as well as the external aspects of some of the key lessons that need to be learned, some of the best practices that need to be implemented. The process analysis and modeling is again a significant set of techniques that we can use here to understand what can be done with the processes, where are the breakdowns, what can we improve, do we need to introduce new roles, for example, or do we need to cut down some of the existing steps, how can we remove the waste. So all of these could be done with the process analysis modeling. Interviews here with the sponsors and some of the senior management, executive board members, and the management personnel, again, would give you the inroads into what is in their minds and why we should abide by some of the business rules, some of the procedures, policies that are outlined, and why it's important to follow those. Surveys and questionnaires, again, very important. Quantitative data gathering here, because they would really give you insight into how the solution is being perceived in the context of all the external factors we talked about, right? The political, economic, social, environmental. Considering all those factors, how our solution is faring is basically one of the things. And then root cause analysis is a good technique to understand the underlying underlying cause for one of the problems that we have identified. And SWOT analysis is a good tool, a good technique that we can try and use here to understand the strengths and weaknesses within our own organization in the context of the opportunities and the threats that are posed by these external factors, and how we can leverage our strengths to be able to address those opportunities and to avert the threat that's being posed by the external factors. Very important technique here that we can try and use in that context.